We have entered fully into the information age. We are drowning in a sea of information. Everyone at work or in their personal life has at least one pile of material that they are planning to get to, and sometimes several piles. There are time management specialists today who charge $1,500 a day just to show busy executives how to get control of information overload. We do not lack information and ideas in a variety of forms, like books, magazines, articles, newsletters, faxes, correspondence, audio tapes, videotapes, and a variety of other communication devices. What we lack is the ability to analyze this material quickly for what is relevant, and then to remember the essential ideas that we need at the moment to do our work better and to improve our personal lives. There's never been a time where the development of your memory has been more important than it is today, except for perhaps tomorrow and next week and next year. Fortunately, with your 100 billion brain cells, each covered with as many as 20,000 dendrites, connecting them with other brain cells, your capacity to learn and memorize is virtually unlimited. There are many times when you need to memorize something such as steps in a process, numbers, spelling, or codes, such as for an ATM machine. Being able to recall facts like these make your life easier, and it saves a good deal of time. You don't have to look around for the material or look it up somewhere. You can also use memory techniques to pass exams, both in school and for advancement in your field. Memory techniques enable you to do your job more effectively because they put essential facts at your fingertips. And it's very impressive to other people when you can pull names, numbers, facts, and information out of your head quickly in a work or personal situation. Here's a true story. Not long ago, a man with an average memory decided that he would concentrate for as long as it took, and in this case it took 3 or 4 years, on developing his memory to the highest possible level. He set a challenge for himself to memorize the names and phone numbers of a page of the Los Angeles telephone directory. He not only accomplished his goal of supermemory, but he exceeded it. He has now memorized the entire Los Angeles telephone directory, including every name and number. When he was tested on his memory, the questioners found that they could give him any name, and he could give the number, or they could give him any telephone number, and he could give the name that went along with it. When you hear of memory feats like this, you are often overwhelmed by how smart these people must be. These are usually ordinary people who got ordinary grades in school with average intelligence. They have just developed their memory faculties to the point where they can accomplish extraordinary things, and so can you if you just learn how. Throughout this program, everything that you have learned from the very beginning has been aimed at helping you to memorize and apply material faster and faster. This is the real essence of all accelerated learning techniques. And even though it's a bold claim, you'll find that remembering what you have learned becomes much easier if you discipline yourself to learn in the comprehensive stages suggested in the previous sessions. If you increase your motivation to learn by setting clear learning goals for yourself and thinking about how the new knowledge and skills can help you, you will learn and remember better. If you prepare your mind to learn thoroughly through relaxation, visualization, and creating a pleasant environment, you will learn better and easier. If you take in the information in a way that suits your learning preferences, either visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, you will find that the material soaks into your brain easier. If you explore the material using one or more of your 7 intelligences, especially your dominant intelligence, you will learn at a faster rate than ever before. In this session and in the following session, you will learn the most popular, practical, proven, and dependable methods for memorization ever developed by memory specialists, written about by memory experts, or taught in memory courses. But, like any other set of skills, memory skills must be practiced continually until they become second nature to you. Developing your memory, like developing a muscle, is something that you begin slowly and then continue with for the rest of your life. By the way, the research is overwhelming with regard to mental activity and longevity. The more alert and aware you keep yourself by taking in new information and stimulating your mind to recall and apply the information, the physically healthier you will be, the more energy you will have, the better your brain will function, the more creative you will remain, and the longer you will live. There are 4 logical stages of learning, plus a 5th. The first logical stage of learning is when you are an unconscious incompetent. This is when you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know. As long as the person remains an unconscious incompetent, there is no hope for him. If he is not aware of what he does not know, he will see no need to learn the essential knowledge and skills he needs to improve his life. The second level of learning is when you become a conscious incompetent. This is the situation that exists when you don't know a particular subject, but you are aware that you don't know it. This is the beginning of change, growth, and development. It is only when you become aware of your own ignorance that you become open to the possibility of learning new material and improving your life. The third stage of learning is when you become a conscious competent. This is the stage where you learn new material and practice it, and you are consciously aware of what you are doing throughout. Everyone goes through the period of conscious competence where they are concentrating on what they are doing for the first time or the first few times. They are consciously aware that they are competent. The fourth stage of learning is when you become an unconscious competent. This is where you have learned a subject so thoroughly that you can perform well in that area without conscious thought. When you learned to read, you had to sound out each word. Today, you can read an enormous amount of material without even slowing down to consider the pronunciation or the meaning of particular words. When you learned to ride a bicycle, you were awkward, clumsy, and highly aware of everything you were doing. Today, you can ride a bicycle or drive a car without conscious thought. Arriving at the level of the unconscious competent is what you do when you have thoroughly memorized and internalized the new knowledge and skill. The final or fifth stage of learning comes when you can turn around and teach someone else what you have learned and have them both understand and perform competently in that area. This is the highest form of memorization and understanding. Your goal should be to reach this point in the critical knowledge and skill areas of your work as quickly as possible. Obviously, there can be no learning without memory. So let's start off with a little bit about how your memory actually works, and then move on to some of the things that you can do to improve it. Without these ideas, as much as 70% of what you learn today can be forgotten within 24 hours, which means that you're wasting fully 70% or more of your time in any learning situation if you are not reinforcing that learning with memory techniques. You have both a short-term and a long-term memory. Your short-term memory is designed to hold information temporarily. For example, a phone number that you have looked up or a specific piece of information usually only goes into your short-term memory. You remember just long enough to use it, and then you forget it. You could think of your memory like transferring sheep into a big field. Short-term memory is like a holding pen at the entrance to the field. To transfer the sheep into the field or into long-term memory, you need to deliberately drive them in. Researchers have found that information needs to be repeated or acted on in some way in order to be transferred from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. Exploring what you have learned using your range of intelligences is one way to act on the new information and to assure that you retain it faster and longer. Researchers have also discovered that we have separate memories for sounds, sights, and feelings. That's why it makes sense not just to read something, but to repeat it out loud and, if possible, to find a way to associate it with a physical movement. For example, if you were learning a foreign language, you would read the word or phrase, speak it out loud, and act it out in an exaggerated way. This gives you 3 chances to learn the word or phrase rather than the single chance way of learning when you engage only one of your learning modalities. This need to act on the information explains why it's so important to make notes as you listen to a talk or lecture. When you make notes, you are both listening and writing. In this way, you involve your memory for sight, the notes, for sound, the talk or word spoken, and for movement, which you use with the physical action of writing. Again, by taking notes, you are learning in a multisensory way and dramatically increasing your propensity to remember. The good news is that your memory is already excellent. Work by Dr. Wilder Penfield at the Montreal Neurological Institute some years ago proved that memory is permanent. It is just the recall that we have problems with. In a series of experiments, they took patients who were undergoing various forms of brain surgery and gave the patients small jolts of electricity at different parts of the brain. These patients were then able to recall events that had occurred 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, even when they were as young as 5 or 6 years of age, with perfect clarity. They could recall the sight, the sound, the feeling, and all the details of the situation vividly, including colors and textures, when a particular part of the brain was stimulated. This went a long way to demonstrate that every experience you have ever had, you have recalled perfectly in every detail. One of your jobs is to learn how to access that information on demand, which we will discuss as we move along. Here's an exercise for you. Take a moment and imagine in your mind's eye opening your kitchen door. Now, starting with the wall on your left, mentally note everything in your kitchen. Observe the cupboards, the pictures, the kitchen appliances, the position of the stove, the refrigerator, the counter, the oven, the microwave, and everything else. Open the cupboards one by one and look inside, noticing where the plates, cups, and glasses are stored. The detail you can remember is incredible. You are probably amazed to see how excellent your memory is for things that you seldom think about. And that's just your kitchen. You could do the same exercise with every other room in your house. Police detectives are trained to be able to do the same with the rooms in a house or office that they are investigating after one visit. Napoleon Hill tells of a memory expert who was teaching a class about the importance of observing things carefully rather than just walking past them indifferently. He took the class for a walk down a busy street where they passed in front of several shop windows with displays of merchandise inside. When they came back to the classroom, he asked the class to write down as many things that they could remember from the shop windows they had passed. The brightest and most observant person in the class remembered something like 49 items from the short stroll down the street. Then the teacher began to recite off the things he had remembered, and the total was in excess of 600 different items that he had observed and stored away. The difference was not in the intelligence of either the instructor or the students. The difference was in the training and the commitment to remember. There's nothing wrong with your memory, you just need to learn to use it properly. Your long-term memory prefers to deal with meanings, so when you feed your memory with the type of information it likes to work with, it functions much better. If you try to memorize facts without understanding them and how they relate to each other, very little will happen. The whole essence of excellent memory is the ability to form associations between new, incoming information and already existing information. This is why the more you learn, the more you can learn. Your job is to use every single device possible to hook incoming information into old data so that you retain it for a long period of time. Associations create meaning because we remember things that have meaning for us, and things have meaning when you can connect them or associate them with what you already know. In learning new European languages such as French, Spanish, or German, it's extremely helpful to learn how English evolved from those languages and the similarities that still exist within them. As many as 25% of these languages, as well as Italian, can be related to English words and meanings. Because of these associations, it's possible to learn one of these languages far faster than if you started out trying to figure out each individual word or phrase by itself. Whenever you have something new to learn, ask yourself what connections or associations the new material has with things with which you are already familiar. You also remember information that is organized in some sequence or in some relationship to other information. When you visualize your kitchen or your cupboards, you can see things in order and in relation to each other. Your cupboard with your dishes is laid out in such a way that different dishes are on different shelves in relation to each other. Organizing what you are learning into groups or categories works well. The reason is that by organizing material, you are actively doing something with the information rather than just passively looking at it. You are forming those critical connections and associations that hook the material into your long-term memory. The best strategy to ensure that you have strongly registered new information is for you to deliberately create links, connections, and associations between the old information and the new. One of the reasons why learning maps are so effective is because they allow you to create links between ideas and associations that you may not have seen before. These associations help your memory. Learning maps look a lot like brain cells. The main theme in the middle has ideas branching out from it, very similar to neurons and dendrites. Maybe that's why learning maps seem to work so well, because they're consistent with the way your brain works. Let's take a moment to explore how your memory works. Here is a list of 7 words. I will recite them one by one, and you listen prior to recalling them afterwards. Here they are. Truth, table, fork, Zulu, radio, wisdom, flower. Now, stop the tape and see how many of these words you can remember from one recitation of the list. Let's see what kind of conclusions we can draw from this simple exercise. If you compare your memory to the 7 words that I recited, you will notice the following points. First, you probably remember the first word of the series, the word truth. This is because you tend to remember more of the beginning of any learning session or situation. You've heard it said that first impressions are lasting. Your mind seems to be more open, alert, and uncluttered when you're exposed to a new learning situation of any kind. Second, you probably remember the last word, the word flower, as well. This is because you tend to remember more of what you learn at the end of each session or experience. In fact, as a professional speaker, one of the first things I learned was that people are most affected by what happens at the beginning of a talk or seminar and what happens at the end. The various books and courses of instruction on public speaking will tell you to plan the beginning and the end of the talk carefully, word for word, and then develop the body of the talk in the middle. Good speakers and good entertainers almost invariably save the very best part of their material for the very end, knowing that this is where they will leave the most lasting impression on their listeners. If you put these two conclusions together, the importance of the first word and the importance of the last word, you will have a typical pattern of recall from a learning session that says that your potential for recall is highest at the beginning and at the end, and lowest in the middle. So here's an interesting point. If you want to keep your levels of recall high, you should add lots of beginnings and endings to your learning sessions. The way to do this, as we mentioned earlier, is to take regular breaks. Most people find it difficult to really concentrate for more than 20 to 30 minutes at a time. So don't force yourself into long learning sessions. Stop frequently and take 1 or 2 minute holidays. Get up, walk around, close your eyes, and breathe deeply. Have a conversation with someone. Make a telephone call. Do some exercise. Anything to break your space as you go through learning sessions. The effect of taking frequent breaks is that it keeps your recall level much higher because you have lots of beginnings and endings where you tend to remember the most. Going back to our list of words, which as you recall were truth, table, fork, Zulu, radio, wisdom, and flower, you probably remembered the word Zulu as well. This was because it stood out from the list, and it was therefore easier for you to form a mental picture of a Zulu. This would be even easier if you had seen the movies Zulu or Zulu Dawn, which were made a few years ago. You tend to remember things that are odd, bizarre, comical, rude, or sexual. These things give your mind a little jolt and are easy to picture, so they are more memorable to you. If you want to remember something then, try really hard to associate it with a funny or unusual mental image. This is exactly what the professional memory experts do, and you'll shortly learn how to do the same thing to remember the names of people you meet, where you left your car keys, and other facts or details about a subject. You also remember real concrete things more easily than you do abstract concepts or ideas. The more specific and concrete you can make a word or a fact, the easier it is for you to get your mind to grab a hold of it. Real things are easier to remember than abstract ideas because you can picture them in your mind's eye. You remember pictures many times better than words, so find a way to make a picture of what you are learning, either literally or in your head. For example, if you think of the word wisdom, you can think of Socrates, the philosopher who is known for his great wisdom. If you were thinking of the concept of justice, you could visualize a courthouse or a figure of justice blindfolded, holding the scales of justice. In this way, you take an abstract and you make a specific picture of it that you could hook into. Here's an important point. Many people think that they lack the ability to visualize, but this concern is based on the misunderstanding that you need to actually see the image as if it were in glorious color in CinemaScope. Nothing could be further from the truth. Such vivid visualization may be extra helpful, and you can learn it over time, but it's not necessary for memorization. Everyone can visualize sufficiently to improve their memory. Like a muscle, it's an ability that you can develop through use. Here's the proof. What side of your car is your steering wheel on? The only way you can answer that question as quickly as you did is by visualizing it in your mind's eye. Here's another question. Have you ever worried about anything? Are you worrying about anything now? Everybody has worries, and worry is a process whereby you picture something unpleasant and then you feel as if it had already happened. By visualizing the worry situation, you make it real for you, and you experience the real emotions that would go along with the situation if it actually occurred. So, if you can worry, you can visualize. Here's another question. How many windows are there in your kitchen? If you can answer that, you can visualize. Fully 99% of the population have the capacity to form visual images. Your job is to develop this capacity to a higher and higher level. Your visual memory is very strong, and the faster and better you activate it, the better your memory will be for virtually everything else. A picture is worth 1,000 words. In a study from the University of Rochester, a group of people were shown 2,500 separate photographs, one every 10 seconds. 3 days later, they were shown 250 pairs of photographs. The photographs in the pairs were deliberately similar to each other. One picture was a picture they had seen, and the other was new. Yet the respondents in this study could tell with more than 90% accuracy which of the photos they had seen before and which they had not. It's because of the strength of your visual memory that we are emphasizing so many visual tools of learning. I've encouraged you to make mental pictures of what you are learning by drawing a diagram, a chart, a sketch, or a cartoon, and by using color, highlighting, and underlining. When you create your own diagrams, charts, or learning maps, you begin to see the patterns in the information. Each piece of information then triggers your memory of other things that are associated with it in the same picture. If I ask you to think about your dining room table, you will almost instantly be aware of all the other furniture in the room around your dining room table. You might even think back to when and how you bought the dining room table, and your situation in life at the time, and the dining room tables that you looked at before you selected the one you purchased. The single concept of dining room table will trigger your memory for dozens and eventually hundreds of other details. Many people think they are poor in geography. However, if you took a particular part of the world and you drew a map of each country in that part of the world, and then drew a map of that entire part of the world with each country in place, like a jigsaw puzzle, you would be amazed at how quickly you would learn your geography and how permanently you would retain it. The 4 R's of memory are 1. Review, which is an active attempt to remember a particular fact or piece of information. Number 2 is registration, which means getting it into your long-term memory using a memory device. Number 3 is retention, which is keeping it in your long-term memory long enough for it to become permanent. And number 4 is recall, which is accessing those facts from your long-term memory when you need them. If you look at a model of your memory, you will find a real difference between the registration of information and the ability to recall it on demand. In order to recall what you have learned, you need to register it strongly so that it makes an impression. This requires action on your part. It requires that you do something. New facts and information come into your short-term memory. If you do not reflect on them or review them, they drop out of your short-term memory and are quickly forgotten. However, if you review the information, you register the new facts and they pass into your long-term memory where you can recall them at a later time. Review is an active attempt to register information in your long-term memory. You do this by hooking the facts into your visual, auditory, and physical memories. The brain has lots of memory sites or locations, more than you could ever use, and the more sites or senses you involve, the better you will register the new information. It's like putting reminders up all over your house. The more places you put reminders to jog your memory, the easier it is to remember. An ideal time to review what you have learned would be when you go back to the subject after a break. But a review is not the same as a simple repetition. Simple repetition without actively exploring the meaning of the subject has much less effect on your memory. For this reason, the form of your review should vary. Sometimes it can be a rereading of your learning maps. Sometimes you can summarize the material out loud. Sometimes you can run through the material from beginning to end without any notes or prompts at all, just from your memory. If you read about something, repeat it out loud, picture it in your head, and jot down a couple of reminders. In this way, you've reviewed it visually, auditorily, and physically. This is a multisensory review that doubles and triples the likelihood that you will remember the material. For example, a group of students was given a list of nonsense syllables to learn. Nonsense words are the most difficult words to learn because they lack meaning or association with each other. Each of the groups was instructed to spend different times on reading and review. The group that spent 100% of their time just reading the nonsense syllables were found to have remembered 65 of the syllables. But the group that spent only 20% of their time reading the syllables and 80% of their time reviewing the syllables in different ways were able to remember 137 nonsense syllables, a doubling of memory power in the same period of time by merely approaching the material in a different way. The time you spend reviewing what you have learned can at least double and perhaps even triple your recall. Some studies show a 400% improvement in memory by using proper review techniques. People who don't review as they learn are constantly putting new information into their minds, but they are then allowing that information to slip away. This often frustrates them and makes learning difficult for them because they start to believe that they lack the capacity to hold on to the material. They become less motivated to learn new information because they doubt that they have the ability to hold on to it. The problem is that they're not reviewing it properly or often enough. Spending a little time to register it properly at the beginning saves a huge amount of time later. The simple truth is that most information is not forgotten. The problem is it was never shifted from short-term memory into long-term memory in the first place. You can rapidly increase the amount at which you internalize and memorize new information by the use of 3 psychological tricks that you play on your mind as you learn. First, as you listen or read, imagine that your boss has asked you to take in this information and give him or her a complete report of all the key points and ideas that he or she can use afterwards. In other words, think about how you would give this report to your boss or to another senior person at the same time you are learning the material yourself. This forces you to learn on 2 levels simultaneously and greatly increases the likelihood of your memorizing the material. Second, imagine that you are learning this material prior to giving a course on this material to a room full of students. As you learn, think of how you would lay out this material and teach it to others. Remember, 2 of the most important rules in learning and personal development are these. First, you learn what you teach. Teaching a subject is one of the fastest ways to understand it at great depth. Second, you become what you teach. The more important a subject is to you and to your work and your personal life, the more important it is that you look for ideas to transfer your knowledge to others. The third technique you can use is to imagine that you are going to be writing a book on the subject that you are learning, and that you would be writing it from a brand new viewpoint from this author or instructor or any other. As you learn the new material, think of how you would reorganize and resynthesize it in your own way to make it even better and more accessible than it is in its current form. Think of your memory like a library with thousands of books or facts stored in it. If the books were stored in a haphazard manner, or in an irrelevant manner, such as by size or color, they would be almost impossible for you to find any one book. This is because there is no logical connection between them. However, if the books were stored in an organized way, alphabetically, by subject and author, then retrieval or recall becomes quick and easy. So to remember well, you need to create plenty of strong connections or associations among data. To demonstrate this, 3 groups of students were each asked to learn 10 new words. The first group just read the words. The second group sorted the words by types of words. The third group formed sentences that contained the words. The results? Group 3 remembered 2.5 times better than Group 1. Why? Because by forming sentences, they associated and related the words to each other. In a second study, 4 groups of students were asked to learn pairs of words, like the words dove and the word car paired together. The first group read the words silently. The second group read a sentence aloud that contained the words. The third group made up their own sentence and read it aloud. The fourth group made up a vivid mental picture where the words interacted with each other. They created a sentence like, "The dove just missed a speeding car." Which group do you think learned the best? The answer is that each group did better than the one before it. The group that read a sentence aloud that contained the words did better than the group that read the words silently. The group that made up their own sentence and read it out loud did better than the group that merely read another sentence aloud, and the group that made a vivid mental picture did better than any of the other 3 groups. In fact, the final group learned 3 times better than the first by combining the words in a vivid mental picture. Memory could have been increased even more if the fourth group had been asked to describe out loud their mental picture of the words interacting. In this way, they would have had a story with interactive pictures and sound, and their rate of memorization would probably have been 4 or 5 times the group that merely read the material silently. Here's some ideas that you can use to remember more from any learning situation. First, at the beginning of the learning session, relax and let go of any concerns. Take a few deep breaths and close your eyes if possible and listen to some gentle classical music. During the learning session, take frequent breaks every 20 to 30 minutes. Get up, breathe deeply, roll your shoulders and your neck, walk around, get a drink of water, and change your space. Make any information memorable by doing something to the information so that it's more vivid and more likely to stick. Highlight the book or information with color. Your emotional middle brain, which controls your memory, likes color and takes extra notice of it. Make an active mental picture of the information. Create learning maps to show connections and associations. Visualize scenes, words, or parts actually moving, or draw a picture that represents what the new material means to you. Another way to remember in a learning situation is to sort the information into groups or lists that are related to each other. Order the groups or lists in what you consider to be their relative order of importance. Read the new material aloud. Even read it aloud in a funny accent. You remember what is unusual or bizarre, so use that fact to your advantage. Find a connection or an association between what you have just learned and what you already know. We'll talk more about this in the next session. Summarize what you have learned out loud in your own words. This is an absolutely key skill. People who spend time repeating material remember at least twice as much as people who only spend their time reading and rereading it. Another simple but highly effective way to memorize what you are learning is to keep glancing back at what you have just learned. The more often you review things in your mind, the more firm an impression the material will make. Remember the jungle path we referred to earlier. The more often you walk down that path, the more clearly defined it becomes. That's why review and repetition are absolutely essential to accelerated learning. A final point on memorizing material is the importance of sleeping on new material as you are learning it. Often you forget because the information is never registered properly. Sometimes, however, information just seems to fade from your memory. In fact, early researchers thought that memory gradually faded, rather like a piece of curtain can be faded by the sun. We now know, however, that memory becomes blurred when new information is so similar to what we already know that newer experiences interfere with our memory of the material. It is therefore not predominantly the passing of time that causes memory to fade, it's interference by similar things we have subsequently learned. You can combat this process by deliberately interrupting an important learning session by an overnight sleep. The most important function of sleep is to allow your brain to consider the new things you have learned and experienced during the day. These are then filed and consolidated into your memory system. This happens during what is called rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. REM sleep occurs when your eyes move rapidly behind your closed eyelids at night. These REM sessions coincide with dreaming, which led researchers to speculate that you sleep in order to dream. In turn, you dream in order to sort and integrate your new experiences into the existing networks of your memory. According to this approach, the sleeping brain is like an offline computer. No new information comes in during sleep. Instead, the time is taken up with making sense of what you've already experienced or learned. Therefore, your ideal learning pattern would be the following 4 steps. First, learn the material in a variety of ways. Second, review the material briefly before you go to sleep. Third, sleep. And fourth, briefly review the previous day's learning again in the morning. To test this theory, 2 groups of students were assigned to learn a word list for the same amount of time. The first group was tested after 8 hours of daytime activity. They scored 9% correct recall of the list of words. The second group was tested after 8 hours of sleep. They scored 56% recall, an improvement in memory of more than 6 times. If you can't sleep overnight between learning sessions, a period of different activity such as listening to music or exercising will cause less interference and help the process of memory. This is why we say that a change is often as good as a rest. The very fact that similar material interferes with your ability to memorize would suggest that you vary your subjects throughout the day. If you were studying mathematics, you wouldn't study geometry immediately after algebra. You wouldn't study French immediately after German. You wouldn't study one area of law immediately after another. Instead, You would learn better by studying something completely different that requires your brain approaching it in a whole new way. In the next session, I'll show you some of the most powerful techniques ever developed to improve your memory.